other thing I realized is like, I can leverage people that I already know. And so you start to leverage your network, which leads me to a part I don't have on here, but that is practicing how to accept others' generosity as being a gift to you, right? I felt guilty sometimes of like accepting other people's generosity. No, it's a form of like community building, and it's a form of their philanthropy potentially. So yeah, I am Ordinary Sherpa, just like 30 seconds about Ordinary Sherpa, so that's not confusing for anybody. That was really designed for me to have a platform to really connect with other people like you who were way ahead of me on the journey. So it's inspiring families to connect through adventure. I'm not super active in the FI space. Like, I don't talk a lot about personal finance, although I'm willing to talk about that if you want me to. But I talk more about adventure being the medium or the platform to really experiencing new things, right? So adventure, in essence, is being willing to step outside your comfort zone, being willing to try new things. And so that's really how we've designed our life. Everything is an experiment. This is our crazy crew on Christmas. So I mentioned the dog because the dog was seriously a limiting factor in all of this. We had tested 4 weeks in Hawaii thinking we were going to go do an around the world trip. We were going to do 10 countries. We were going to do a month in each country. Like, that was my grandiose vision. And then we went to Hawaii for a month and the kids were like, but we miss the dog. I'm like, are you freaking kidding? Like, we're in Hawaii. There are 3 other dogs. So we had to kind of shift. We were not traditionally homeschoolers. So we were all in a public school setting. We had W-2 jobs that we liked. We weren't already doing these things. This was a complete shift for us. We also have a 4th generation farmhouse that we weren't willing to sell. Like, we have a lot of emotional ties to the land, to the property, to the house. We're currently remodeling it. So nothing of our lifestyle now is as what it was when we kind of started on this process. And I would say roughly in my head, I was doing like a goal setting planning year kind of thing. And I had this vision, like, I just want every day to feel like vacation, right? Because you go on vacation, we connect as a family. I don't feel like everything is pulling at my energy, my time. So I wanted that feeling. And that's ultimately kind of the guiding light to how we've designed this. So that's kind of the why. And the way I got there was really thinking more holistically about our life. So I feel like when I was listening to a lot of the Choose FI podcast or the other podcasts, I was seeing a lot focused on the upper right quadrant. It's very black and white, right? Your metrics are defined. I can see them. I know what they are. What I wasn't finding is like, what are the other metrics? What's the rest of the circle? How do I measure what does my spirituality look like? Or how much fun am I having, right? So I wanted to create a framework for me. And this was all for me. Like, I never intended on sharing this. I didn't. So for what it's worth, I'm an open book. Ask me whatever questions you want, including love and family. People sometimes want to know how intimacy works in an RV. I am not going to cover that in my presentation, but willing to talk about it offline. So I had used this, and this is really common in coaching frameworks and methodologies. This is often like the wheel of life. You can change the slices to be whatever categories are important for you. This just happens to kind of be the way I wanted to design our life. And they're not all equal, right? I just wanted these things to show up. The other thing I found is that often when you start thinking about success, we immediately jump to like external indicators, like what's your title? What's your status? How are your kids' achievement in school? What are their grades? What accomplishments have you made? And those are fine, but then I found myself like on a striving journey, and I wanted to be on a thriving journey, which were much more internal metrics. So I created the joy audit, which when I say that out loud, I feel like such a nerd, but I am super proud of this, and I know you guys will all appreciate it. And I have this all available, so I'll tell you how you can do this later, but auditing our family joy individually over a period of time was kind of the way we keep checks and balances along the way. So the way I'm going to frame this is I'm going to try to take each of these slices, share a lesson from our year. We officially left in January 19th of 2023. We're still on the road. We're still going to keep going, at least through April for sure. And so there's a lesson and then some questions. If you're thinking about this lifestyle, what are some questions I have asked myself or I've collected and crowdsourced, regardless of what it looks like? You don't have to be in an RV. You don't have to have 3 kids or a dog to do this. Like, this is something that's really, I would say can be applied to a lot of different styles. So my career, I love my career. I worked in family philanthropy, and I didn't really want to leave my job, but at the same time, it was place-based. I could do it remotely, but then I had this conscience thing, right? Like, how do I design community change work when I'm enjoying life out on the mountains in Colorado, out in the Rockies, and talking about poverty in Northeast Wisconsin, right? Like, there was like a moral obligation that I didn't feel like I could do both at the same time. So I started, quote unquote, a side hustle, and then I realized I wanted it to be more side, less hustle, and because I quickly jumped in it and made it a job. So that was like the travel influencer work that I started doing, and realized, like, that sounds good. It's not really that good. Like, it was just optimizing my travel budget. I really wasn't. And then I had to be on and like taking pictures, so I wasn't enjoying the moment as much. So I think this quote of like, just because we can doesn't mean we should. There's a lot of things I can do, right? Like, I can write a book. I can do this. I can do that, but should I, right? And I think that's a question you can answer for yourself that we may not be able to. A lot of people will like espouse their advice onto you or like vomit on you, and you get to decide, like, I'm just going to clean that up and leave it there, or am I going to... So some questions I would say is, if I monetize my passion, will it feel like work? I mentioned like the travel influencer stuff for me, getting paid from tourism boards to do the things that they wanted me to say about them. I was like, this isn't that fun. Okay, check that box. I did it, right? I experimented with that. And then I think the second question that was really important for me is, beyond money, what does my career offer? One thing I didn't know until about 3 months into our gap year is I crave like super complex problem solving that matters, right? Like, not a game where I'm just like playing this hypothetical thing, or not just designing a trip for all of my, I needed something like super meaningful that was complicated enough. So I did like raise my hand and reach out to a couple of my professional network, just to say, like, I think I'm available for some work, just very part-time. So I work about 20 hours a month. With a little bit of consulting and doing some strategy work. And we'll see, like, I'm always in the state of like, I don't know if I'm ramping up that work or if I'm ramping down that work yet. So I don't have answers to a lot of my questions either, but it's fun to like think about that. And the way we frame this from a financial perspective is we created a gap year fund so that it could fund for sure an entire year of our life. So our life expenses was fully covered. This was, again, I can talk about the mechanics, but that would take up too much time and I only get 20 minutes. So we had this fund that we could use. And then we had an emergency fund that I didn't realize we had. And we had some travel rewards, and we had an HSA, so we had all these different tools that we knew we could optimize if we wanted to. I didn't know how hard it was going to be to withdraw money from those accounts, because I was like emotionally attached to the saving process, that I was like, okay, the first cut is really the deepest. Like, it hurts emotionally. So one of the things I say I practice all the time, or I encourage people to practice, like, practice spending money and be really indulgent, just like one time, to know how that feels. And there were a lot of things, like, as I started to figure out what all the problems were, I was like, well, how could we solve this differently? How can we leverage what we already have? And this is going to be so unoptimized, and that's okay. Like, I want to give you permission. You don't have to have it perfect. Our route makes absolutely no sense. We get 6 miles to the gallon in an RV, by the way. And like, when gas price, there's a way we could have saved a lot of money on gas. We didn't do that. But in part because we could find other ways that were more meaningful for us. So we have this picture in the bottom is us at a science museum. We leverage membership. So we have a membership to a local science museum. It's $60 for a year for a family. That gets us into science museums all over the country. And I'm not talking like little, tiny, small, these are like the Exploratorium in San Francisco and the NASA Space Museum in Houston. Like, these are really awesome experiences, which we can leverage for homeschool, right? So now I'm not having to teach my kids. We're just like, go play, go learn, go do something. And at the same time, we're learning a lot too. And it gives us a break from RV life, right? So I don't have to figure out how to entertain my kids. I can just take them to this place. We leverage public libraries. Did you know that you can become a non-resident and get a library card all over the country? So usually it's like $10. That's what we did when we were in Alaska this summer. And then when you're a member of a library and you have a library card, you can check out passes to other attractions. Sometimes you can even check out like a state park pass, or you can check out a lot of different things. So leveraging your library. We also could check out, there was like a food tool that I don't have because we, have like 227 square feet to be exact of living space. So it was like, yeah, the options for like kitchen appliances are limited. I can check this out at a library, right? So you don't have to have everything with you all the time. You can leverage those resources. And the other thing I realized is I have all these travel rewards. We're not flying too many places right now. I'm not staying in too many hotels, although we do. We stay in Airbnbs to like take a vacation from the RV. But I started realizing, like, as bonuses were coming out for redemptions, I was like, oh, wait a minute, I can wipe out campsite fees because it's coded as travel, or I can actually just like wipe out an expense, like a whole bunch of grocery expenses. I know that's not optimized, okay? Don't yell at me. I know that, right? It's not ideal, but I have it, right? So why am I letting this amount of resources just sit there when I could be leveraging it? So a lot of this is a mind game. And then how do we want to fill our days and what does that cost? We tested a lot of things. We've done everything from private dirt biking experiences in the back range of Colorado to going to a public library and playing board games, right? So it can run the gamut. And we don't do the dirt biking every day, right? We've figured out, so we downhill ski and snowboard pretty often. Like we're going to try and hit 40 different resorts this year. We go to national parks and state parks and we hike. My son has a fly fishing business. So he teaches people how to fly fish. He ties his own flies. My daughter does jewelry and art. My son does balloon making. Thank you to Bob Hines for that. So like they've all found different ways and things that they're curious about, and that's filled their time, and it really doesn't cost that much. And the other thing I realize is like I can leverage people that I already know, such as a lot of you have invited me to your homes or have invited me to like do things with you. And so you start to leverage your network, which leads me to a part I don't have on here, but that is practicing how to accept others' generosity as being a gift to you, right? I felt guilty sometimes of like accepting other people's generosity. No, it's a form of like community building and it's a form of their philanthropy potentially. So you also have to like recognize some of these things. In the learning space, a lot of people ask me like, what does school look like? And that was hard for us because learning looked like something, right? We had been conditioned in a system. We had experienced that system in multiple different ways as a parent, as a student, as a teacher. And I realized all of that life that we had experience with was masking a lot of really unique opportunities and challenges that I wouldn't have seen otherwise. For example, my kids are hilarious. And I don't say that to be like, they're genuinely funny. Like when I hear them talking, I was like, oh, I'm not going to tell, we can tell stories later, but there are a lot of different things. And I would also say, like, I have a child that really struggles with the lack of structure that we have. So like, what's enough structure for him while allowing my daughter, who's super creative and gets hyper-focused and can get occupied for hours at a time on a project, like how do we support both of those? So I think the question is not, what do you do for homeschool? It's like, what does school look like for you? Because we had to de-school, decondition. I have an entire episode I'll share with you later in the resources on like, how do you start to unlearn, unlocate, unschool? Like, how do we undo some of these things that we've, built systems and habits and lifestyles around? And then really my question is, what are they interested in learning? And then how do I support it? And if not me, then who? So these two pictures here, this is my son. Oh my gosh, we're in Wyoming and Thermopolis, Wyoming, and there's like these ice heaves. And there's my older son is fishing and there's a drone. And my son's like, what is that? And I was like, I don't know. And there's a dog. So my daughter's there, my son is there. And the stranger is flying a drone. And Micah is super curious. And he's like looking at her. He's like, come here. And she hands him her drone. And I was like, oh my God, like that was not a good idea. And she's like, oh no, he can't break it. And I was like, he will. Like, I don't know how much that costs. There's so much fear. And literally she sat there with him for almost an hour. Like, yeah, no, this is how, I don't even know what that does. Like, let's figure that out. And this was someone I did not know. This wasn't like contrived or set up. It just totally happened. And then my son on the right, my uncle that lives in Alaska is a blacksmith. And I don't know if anybody follows Alaska weather. Why would you? But it rained for 40 days of the 60 days we were in Alaska this year. So like creativity was gone, right? Like I was done. And my uncle was like, would you guys like to come out and like learn how to blacksmith? And I'm like, hell yeah. Like, of course. So like, I don't know, I couldn't have planned for that. I don't know how much that would have cost. It was free, right? Like this is the type of thing, like it's not always me having to come up with the types of resources that we do. One of the challenges is I had a lot of guilt also leaving my job, leaving my family. I knew I was in a space where my parents were self-sufficient. My extended family would be fine. My grandparents have all passed, but I knew there was like this guilt. And so part of me had to embrace this, that it's not my job for others to understand my lifestyle choices, right? That's on them. I can tell them my why, and they will have all kinds of opinions about that. But really, that's on them, not me. And so for us, we had to, again, practice some different scenarios. And one of them being, can I travel solo? And I'll add, in my case, for 3 kids and a dog, while my husband goes back to Wisconsin because his mom was just diagnosed with lung cancer and had to have surgery. So again, those things will happen, right? And we had kind of known like this could be a thing. We knew that there were some health issues that may come up. But the question was really, can I do that? Can I handle that as a quote unquote single mom? A lot of people also ask us about like, so what about your friends? What about the kids, social interactions? If you've met my children, you know that's actually not a problem, because I kind of need them to shut up sometimes and just be like, I want to talk. I want to have this relationship. But what we were finding was like, as we think of someone, so for example, I thought of my friend Megan. My friend Megan is my best friend from college. Haven't seen her in a year and a half. Yesterday I texted her and I was like, I haven't talked to you. What's going on, right? So the intentionality, whereas before I'd be like, oh, I should do this and I should do that. Life just would get in the way. So now that intentionality of like, when I think of someone, we are just trying to be really intentional about like, let's reach out to them. How could we do that? Well, we could FaceTime, we could text them, we could Messenger, and my kids have Messenger kids. We could write letters, like postal we do that too, like that's part of homeschool. So that intentionality really has deepened a lot of our relationships. And I actually feel like we have much deeper connection and community than we've ever had in our lives being place-based. And we have also have a really large family. Really large family, meaning like my dad and mom both come from big families and they all have cousins and, you know, the generational impact of that. So there's a lot of people that we get to see and it's like speed dating, you know, like when they come to see us, it's like, okay, you get a minute and you get a minute. And now it's like we have days to spend with them when we hang out with them. So it's just completely different. So I think the question became, what relationships do you want to nurture when you travel? And then how do you want to do that? So we made a list of 20 people that were like, we haven't seen these people enough. We want to spend more time with them. How do we make that happen? So we try to also create our route so that we do get to spend more intentional time with them. Can I spend 24/7 with my partner or my kids? Like, this is a really critical question if you haven't asked yourself. Or can I spend it alone if you're traveling solo? And this is my answer to that. Brush your teeth, take a shower, and go get fresh air. So every time I get crabby, I'm like, dude, go brush your teeth, right? Like, because what it does is it mentally actually gives your brain a break. It gives you a simple, it like gets the ick off, right? So you're like cleaning your teeth, you're taking a shower, your brain gets to reset. You go outside, you have this like different stimulus. So it kind of desensitizes or de-stimulates the entire group. And everybody can do that, right? It doesn't cost anything. I'm not suggesting this replaces therapy, but it's something until the therapy happens. So in terms of health, we've also had to deal with some pretty interesting things, not on this trip, but on one of our test runs we did, I think just like 2 weeks in the RV. It was our first attempt at like winter camping. We went down through Texas and during a mountain biking, we mountain bike pretty hard. My daughter had an accident, broke both wrists and her elbow, required emergency surgery in Texas. And I was like, I don't have a word for this, but it was, unfortunately tested it and figured it out. Like I had known that you want to keep all your expenses in the emergency room visit. That's counterproductive to what everybody else would say to you. But if you're traveling, all emergency room visits in the United States, well, I guess depending on where you call home. So United States purpose is your insurance will cover you in an emergency, just about any emergency department. Just don't let them ship you out to like, oh, and tomorrow you're going to come in for the cast. And I was like, no, we're not actually. We're not leaving this hospital because we are from Wisconsin and this is an emergency. So all of our hospital expenses and our surgery and everything actually was covered under that umbrella of emergency department. In terms of urgent care, if you go to urgent care, it's not coded the same. So there's a lot of like, as you start to ask these questions, you'll find the right people to get your questions answered. You can't get that from Googling very easily, right? So this is the power of community and knowing who's ahead of you. And then there's parts and pieces of like healthy lifestyles that you have to figure out, how can I replicate this on the road? Our diet is actually much better now, which is interesting, because we have a really small fridge and a really small freezer. So that means I go to the grocery store more frequently. Like I can't leverage this huge freezer in the basement to just like stockpile food. I actually have to be intentional about going to the grocery store every week, getting fresh fruits and vegetables, getting fresh foods. We're naturally walking every day. We're getting outside much more, which also means we're sleeping so much better because we have so much fresh air. And I was kind of joking when I say I go to bed at 8:30, but I actually do go to bed at 8:30 now. And it's pretty glorious because I realized like it would be 10 o'clock at night and I was like, I don't even know what I'm doing. Like I'm sitting here trying to figure out what to do at 10 o'clock at night when it's dark and I have 3 kids that I can't make noise. So this is silly. I'm going to go to bed. And it's been pretty miraculous. And as much as like every day is an adventure, you guys, like, I don't know where the grocery store is. I don't know how to do my laundry in this community. I don't know where we can drive with an RV. Like everything does become much more complicated because I don't know the nuances of each community and we travel pretty fast. So, you know, some things that are like, how am I going to replicate these things? I would say most of that you can do. You just have to decide what you want to do and figure out how to do it. So I mentioned my older son has a fly tying business. It became a business as part of homeschooling. It was just a passion for a really long time. All of that stuff comes with us in the RV. My daughter has an interest in art. So she like does watercoloring and all these things happen in the RV. And so decide what a rich life looks like for you. And this, you know, when you think about like that spirituality, your purpose, whatever those things are, I think we spend a lot of time working on plan B without really giving plan A enough of a shot. What if it's better than you ever imagined possible? And when we came home for a month in November, and I was just like sitting there in awe going, oh my gosh, I never would have imagined that. Like this feels, what I thought was the ceiling is now the floor, right? It just opens up the next level of what is truly possible. So with that, I'm going to pause because Stephen really wanted me to stay to 20 minutes, but I do want to give questions because I want to answer anything really specific about what I talked about. Again, I'm open to answering what that might look like for you or where you get stuck and then offer some additional resources.